Okay.
All right, so we're gonna just talk. All right, what is the gospel bark? So we got Melanie Daniels, we got Jocelyn Henderson, we got Jaron TikTok LeGrere, we got Dr. Jeffrey Murdoch, and myself, Dr. Emorja Roberson. So first, thank you all so much for even getting on here. I want to sort of just jump into a few things real quick. So let's just get straight to it. What is the gospel bark? And before we even get to that point, what inspired me to do this, Jaron had the video of someone was doing, I guess, some overdubs. And I don't know what led you to actually post the explanation of the bark. Maybe somebody asked what it was, or either they were like, ew, what does that sound? I don't know.
A little bit of both, yeah.
Really? Okay. So I want us to discuss what it is. So yeah, so anybody jump in. What is the gospel bark? Actually, Melanie, I know we're talking earlier, so let me have you jump in on this one.
What I know it to be is something that started like Northeast United States. I came up in choirs in the 80s and 90s, so that was like, I guess, the birthing of it. Well, we were learning from the Thompson Community Singers, from like Midwestern choirs, Southern community choirs, like all of the mass choirs, Georgia, Miami, New Jersey, LA mass, so it was different regions, but they all had this commonality for being forceful and powerful. Really, really, like, I guess you could probably call it like a mix of a musical theater vibe with a gospel, major gospel undertone to it. Very expressive, very intentional in delivery, and always like blow your hair back. You know what I mean? Because it was groups of 15 and above, people singing at their most powerful delivery possible. And as we all know, as African Americans, the theater for us starts at church. So
right.
So it's a performance factor into it as well, in that presentation. So all of those things mixed together. But I remember hearing it more from like institutional radio choir in Brooklyn, New York, is where I remember first hearing it as a kid. Now Bishop J.C. White. Oh man, I forgot the name of his church in Bridgeport. But he came from the Brooklyn experience, institutional, the radio choir at 10 o'clock at night on a station here in New York called WWRL. Institutional Church of God of Christ is on the air. You would hear this and everybody, and that's where I first remember hearing the bark.
Okay.
And then all the choirs in the region, in the tri-state area, would mimic that sound. So it was something that developed AUR orally. It's not something that was written. It's not something that could have been taught. Right. It was one of those things that had to be caught. And usually by overzealous directors. And
big other questions, but you know what? That's true. And I'm gonna tag Jaron really quick. So Jaron, because I know you love Ricky Dillard and I know you love James Hall. What, as someone who sings, with these groups or who really studies them, what is your take on the gospel bark?
Well, because my take on it is that, number one, I love it. For the record, I love it. I think it is such a wonderful element of singing that is such to me, a high level skill, and though it's still taught orally and it's not really written and things like that, it's still such a skill that, because a lot of times you see some choirs or some people who try to imitate it and they just kind of are like all over the place. And so I feel like there's a poise, always said there's a poise to it. There's a conditioning for it. And because see, I grew up listening to Ricky Dillard and James Hall. I sang in New G, we sung New G, Ricky Dillard, James Hall stuff growing up in my church. But, we from the Midwest, we from Ohio, right. But we were Chicago, near Chicago, but we still had links, hearing stuff in New York and things like that. So you know, I mean, and there was some local choirs who did it too here. We had oh my God, Terry Nation. I know y'all know these names, but Terry Nation, my parents sang with him back in the day. And a huge choir in the region here, they did it. My parents sang with them. And so I grew up listening to it too, you know, by my parents and just learning this stuff. But I think, like I said, it's just a high level poise skill. And I even say, to you, piggyback off of Dr. Melanie, you know, but piggyback off of her, I feel like there's elements of like a classical opera element to it too, with the longer vowels and the darkness and all this other stuff. There are some elements of like that drama that comes from musical theater, I think comes from a little bit of that classical. I forget who said this, but I want to say, I'm not gonna say who said it because I don't want to misquote, but somebody I remember saying that James Hall's music is very close to God in terms of vernacular, the chamber, classical influence, and things like that. And so,
well, I'm gonna piggyback on what you're saying. Most of the choir members of James Hall Worship and Praise were from the LaGuardia Performing Arts High School. So they grew up around Lincoln Center, where the Metropolitan Opera is, where all of those
teachers.
That's it.
Yeah. So there you go. There you go.
I never knew that. Interesting. So
I didn't even know that either. Yeah.
So if that is the case, then let's sort of backtrack really quick before I get too far ahead. The characteristics of it. If we could describe what does someone need to do if they were to study this? What would you tell them? This, whenever you perform these attributes, this is considered barking. Jocelyn, what would you say?
Baby, I was waiting on the answer for somebody else.
Hold on a second.
I was like, Dr.
What do you say?
Well, I guess Jeff, okay, Jocelyn, what do you think?
I can't even describe it. Dr. Melanie and Dr. Jaron have done such a great job about the bark. For me, it's a thing that just happens. I don't.
Yeah, it's funny because there's no written.
Yeah, I don't
documentation of how to approach it.
Yeah,
because it's something that's taught to us, and we mimicked it.
Yes, we just mimic.
Yeah. Can I give an example?
Yes.
I can give an example and y'all can tell me if I'm wrong. Sunday service choir in the Count Your Blessing. Oh,
yeah, that is.
Yeah.
To me, that's a bark. You let me.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask this. And okay, before I ask Jeff, tell me, how are you teaching your choir to do this? Because I know you said you're on tour right now.
Yeah, we're on tour now. What's interesting is that the Inspirational Chorale, which is one of the groups I conduct at the U of A, it's the longest running diversity initiative on our campus. But it started as a gospel choir. But now, so in 1977, when the gospel choir was formed, it was all Black people, right? But now it's like 50% Black, 50% white. And so when we're performing different Black sacred music genres, I have to do a little bit more explaining than I thought I would have had to do. But as we've discussed, like, it's one of those things where, like, you can't really teach it. But I've had to develop a language to put some of this stuff in work. So, like, I go back to some of my vocal jazz roots. So, like, if I'm singing, if we're singing stuff like by the Real Group or some of those other vocal jazz ensembles, when you get to sections where there's like a vocal shake, right? Yeah, right? Like, so we start with that. And then I'm like, all right, so like those of you who have studied vocal pedagogy, like the vibrato is supposed to have this many pulses per second, right?
Right.
Like when you're studying classical music, right? So I'm having these conversations. I'm like, all right, so when you think about this, when you think about what you're doing, I have to talk to the sopranos about bringing the sound, very much bringing it forward, right? Because the voice teachers at a university are going to say, singing that gospel music is not healthy for your voice. But it is.
Maybe they'll shut you down.
Right. Listen. I got it all through my undergraduate and my master's degree. Stop singing that gospel music, right? But I'm having like these pedagogical conversations. So, all right, bring it into the mask, sopranos, right? Don't put the pressure here. You don't have to put the pressure here. It can come from here. Right. And like, so think about your vibrato having 6 pulses per second, and it's a minor third.
I'm already thinking it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, and this is the kind of language that you have to have with people who are not familiar with it, because
Right.
like y'all have said, like I grew up in South Mississippi.
Yeah.
My introduction to the bark was Orlando Draper in Memphis.
Right.
How did I forget about them?
And I taught high school in Memphis, and everybody that, like, when students would come into my classroom, I don't care what we were singing, it was gonna be every time, right?
Yeah.
We could be singing Haydn, it's gonna be the same way, right?
Okay, sidebar. Do you remember seeing a video? I forget what the young man's name is, Sir Phil, and he was sitting at a wedding reception, and they were playing "Can We Talk?"
Yes.
Yes.
And him and his friend were sitting. "Can we talk?" That's the most tangible definition I can give people of what the bark is.
Well, yeah.
Because church kids, we all do this. It can be something real sweet, and we will bark that thing in a minute, just making fun of it to have fun.
And I think that's where it starts. Like, it goes back to the whole imitation thing.
And
here's what I'm really curious about, because so a little my story I was sharing with Melanie before we started. So growing up in the Phoenix Springs, Florida, I heard James Hall. I had like one of those, like, for example, like a Wow Gospel, and he had a song on there, and it was like God Wants a Yes, or maybe I got it from Bear Share. I don't know, illegally, but I had it. So I remember when I downloaded it, I was like, "What is this? Like, this don't sound good to me." It did not sound good to me at all. I didn't grow up around that sound. I grew up around the Mississippi Mass Choirs, the Roberta Martins, the Georgia Mass Choirs, and so.
Right.
That sound was so foreign to me, so I automatically pushed that out of my mind, like, that is a sound that I don't want to acquire. Now, what I can say is that if we're discussing what barking is based upon, it's barking flat-footed singing, or is it legit a sound that started in the Northeast and has migrated to different parts of the states?
I would argue
probably
that
is a simultaneous.
Yeah. And I think I would take that even a step further and say that, just like, there are certain ways we ornament music. Like, if I'm singing Richard Smallwood, there's a very specific way I'm singing that. If
right.
James Hall, there's a certain way that I'm singing that. Right. So like, I think that it's a performance practice, right? That is added to whatever song, because all gospel music isn't sung the same way, right? Right. And these are conversations that I have with my students on a regular basis. Like, just because you sing in Total Praise, you don't sing Total Praise the same way you sing Thank You, Lord by Vincent Tharp. Like, you don't sing those the same way. And the approach and the performance practice is going to be different. So I think you just have to teach the voice to be able to kind of become all things to all genres.
Adaptable, right? Exactly. Because I bless God for the opportunities that I've had in my music career, that I've sung with Donald, I've sung with the Hawkins, I've sung with Richard Smallwood, I've sung with Ricky Dillard, I've sung with Hall, I've sung with James Hall. We grew up in the same area. I've sung with J.J. Hairston. I've sung, and so that alone is ear training for your behind.
Yeah.
Because you can't approach any one of those individuals or those entities in the same exact way every single time. It's not going to work.
Even though they're all from the Northeast?
They're from all over. But their stylings are different. Like Jaron was talking about, the greatness of the Lord is inconceivable, but they're not going to do it like, my soul does magnify the Lord.
Right.
Lord. It's not going to be the same thing.
Yeah.
There are different versions of it.
Jaron, take us to the nitty gritty. Okay, so Jocelyn gave us an example of, if you're analyzing this on TikTok right now, what would you say happening in the vocal?
Calling me out, analyzing this on
TikTok.
This is a free one.
I would say, generally, this is kind of painting with a general, scope of things, but I would say it has to do with how we shape our mouths. So sometimes it's longer vowels, sometimes it's super like bitey, wide, depending on the song or the word or the vowel.
Mhm.
I would say the vibrato is controlled, though it is a wobble. It is way more intentional than like just singing. Because when I sing, like when I was singing with different choirs growing up, I would sing totally different in the alto section, on the soprano section, versus singing my solo. It's two completely different approaches. If I'm in the choir stand, I'm singing one way, like, maybe a little more strong in that barky sound. But then if I'm singing a solo, I'm going to do just Jaron. So my vibrato may be faster, I may be lighter. So I think it has to do with even like I said, the vibrato is intentional. I think the air pressure is a little more increased depending on what you're doing. I'm not saying you gotta push, but there's a lot more of this in use. Just because you have to sustain these notes, like and if to the west. I mean, do all that in one breath and to keep that vowel open there, straight note, and then bring the vibrato in later. I mean, it's hard. If you push too much, you're gonna kill yourself. But
you done passed out.
You have to constantly kind of think about, and they make it look easy, but it ain't. It ain't.
It's a practice. And so let me ask this question. So during this era when this sound evolved, we'll say, I know, Melanie, you named some choirs, but around what era did those choirs actually, when they established?
Well, the Tommies had been around for like, 40 years by the time the sound was really becoming popular. And we're talking like mid 80s.
Okay.
Mid to late 80s.
I said late, in my mind, I was like late 80s.
Okay. So if the late 80s is the era, so we'll just say that. So the late 80s is the era where the gospel bark became, pretty popular. If gospel barking is a flat-footed singing, would we say that groups like Roberta Martin, were flat-footed singers and they were barking, or the Hawkins, or because they didn't actually perform the wideness of the vowels and the straight tone that evolves into the wide vibrato, we can cross them off the list as those who do not bark?
Well, they do kind of have a bark. Like the Hawkins, their arrangement of My Hope Is Built.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
My hope is built on nothing less. Very intentional with their enunciation, but still has that intensity, that march like intensity. Then Jesus' blood and righteousness, I dare on Christ the solid rock. It's a lot clearer than the bark in the Northeast, but it's still a bark. Then you had Tri-City Singers, that North Carolina thing. And then because Donald's from North Carolina, but he went to school, he went to the conservatory in Cincinnati. So that's a different thought process there. The Gospel Soul Children.
Oh, okay.
Walt Whitman. What's this young man? Lewis. Out of last name is Lewis.
Oh, Kenny Lewis?
Yeah.
Oh.
What's that song? What's the song now loved by them? Champion? Not Champion.
Was it Undefeated?
Yes, God.
I'll listen to that today. That damn. Yes, it's that row.
That makes me very excited.
Adds to library. Let me go.
Yeah,
right. So, and that's a different thing because they're rounder with their sound, even though it's still a bark. It's a lot rounder. For me, the Northeasterners that do it, where I grew up, Long Island, Brooklyn, Queens, Connecticut, Jersey. It's like, okay, if you ever watch the Muppets and turn the volume off. Their head just flipped back and his mouth wide open,
I never thought about that, but you know what? I'll take it. Interesting, but you know,
that's just, I have a cartoon mind. Y'all forgive me.
No,
that's my observation of it.
Mm-hmm.
To describe what it looks like and what it would feel like in your bones.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's another thing working with Donald. He said you got to know, you got to feel it in your marrow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna use that
before it's produced. And that's basically muscle memory.
So much in singing and music and worship. It applies to so much. Yeah.
Huh. Now, if that is the case, and we have, because I can hear Ken Lewis's choir in my head, I can hear, the Hawkins, I can hear, David Walker, I can hear Meacham, I can hear Jay Williams. My question is, whenever I hear these choirs now who have come, and I'm just sort of starting from where I start with James Hall, but those choirs who have come after James Hall, it seems like they are all trying to mimic the James Hall sound.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Do we believe that with imitate? Sorry, well, I guess it's sort of tied into.
Yeah.
Do we?
It is. I don't think imitation is a bad word. I don't.
Okay, thank you. So if that is the case, do we believe that because we imitate these, because we imitate the James Hall so much that we lose the imprint or the blueprint of the sound of that particular choir if everyone's trying to mimic that Northeast sound?
I don't think so, just because you could be duplicated but never, or imitated but never duplicated. That whole thing, it don't matter what choir do, ain't nobody like James Hall. Just like Vision and Richard Smallwood, we can sing these songs, but ain't nobody singing like Vision. Period.
Nope.
You know what I'm saying? Or Donald Lawrence Tri-City. Ain't nobody singing like Tri-City Singers. Period.
Yeah.
So I think our our imitation is inspiration rather than duplication. Because also these different choirs have their own set of song types or libraries that Richard ain't writing, or that Donald didn't write, or James or whatever. So I think from that, just by how time and we progress in knowledge and in skill, I just think as a result, I don't think we have to worry about the imprint of James Hall or Walter Hawkins ever being dissipated or dismantled. It's always because they're stalwart figures in this whole sound. Yeah. So it wouldn't be no Kenny Lewis without Ricky, but it wouldn't be no Ricky without Tommy's. It wouldn't be no so it all goes together.
Yeah.
And we do that in other genres too, right? There's a standard that we all want to reach, and that standard is never going to change. But to be able to listen to James Hall, to be like, if I want to do this thing, I need to listen to James Hall, right? If I want to do this thing, I need to listen to, I need to listen to Brandy if I want to do this, or if I need to listen to Beyonce, or if I want to do this particular thing. Those folks are the standard bearers, I think, and I think that we listen to get better and to try to get to that whatever that standard is.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Because if you think about the progression of some of those choirs as well, the Tommies of the 80s don't sound like the Tommies of the 60s.
Right. What age? Maybe
age, number one. Number two, different writers, different sets of writers that came in.
Yeah. I never thought about that. Okay.
You got Darius and you got Percy.
Yeah.
They were rating all those hits.
Yep. Yeah.
But they don't sound like the old Tommies from the 60s.
Yeah.
Or when Pastor Brunson first started the group.
Yeah.
Nobody's singing Never Alone from Fame.
Yeah.
The same way they did, like they're doing it now.
Yeah.
There's always a different adaptation of it because each person that comes along with an arrangement or with a reimagining of it is putting their flavor into it. So it will, like Jaron said, it's not going to be duplicated.
There's also a reinvention, I think, with time periods. So if you think back to Edwin Hawkins, for example, and the way in which, Oh Happy Day sounded when it was first written. And then you fast forward a decade and a half, and then you got Earth, Wind and Fire and Funk. You got all these these funk bands happened, and then Oh Happy Day sounded very different 20,
Right.
15 years later. And so I think that the bark and that sound can still exist within the context of, of time and space as well, right? As it changes and evolves.
Because to your point, I think the Sunday Collective, like Jocelyn said, to me, they have such a pure gospel, churchy, but still current sound.
Yeah.
And I feel like they keep the traditions of gospel, but it's still very 2022. And I love my LA Mass and then Walter Hawkins just as much as I love the Sunday Collective. Like I love listening to old stuff, but I feel like the Sunday Collective, there are choirs around that are keeping the bark tradition, if you want to call it that, very much alive, but still very current and very palatable for 2022 and beyond.
Right.
Is 80s, 90s, So.
Yeah, because you could, okay, let's do a comparison. Atlanta Draper and the Associates, I Got a Reason to Praise the Lord.
Yes.
Fast forward to Love Fellowship Crusade Choir.
Yeah.
Yep.
Doing it in what, 2010?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. It was maybe,
Yeah. So early 2000s. Different sound. Not only because it was the late Clay that was singing the lead with LFT, but there was a female that was singing it with the Associates. Not just that, just you can hear the similarity, but because of regionally where they're from, it's going to be a little bit different.
True. And now that you're mentioning this, so I'm going to transition to my next question. Now, I put a post up a while back on August 20th, and I said, I said some of y'all I said some of y'all favorite gospel choirs used to be flat. Whoa. And I want to talk
like some of your favorite musical theater artists.
Yes. I know that most Black I know we have a lot of our voices, because of the makeup of our bodies, there's a heaviness a lot of times that comes with our voice. And especially whenever we have a lot of people who have that same heaviness, and some voices are lighter, don't get me wrong, but we have a group of about 50 people who are singing and they are barking, or they have this wide vibrato. Sometimes the tendency is a little on the negative side of the pitch.
Flarp, chat.
I
I said flarp.
On the underside.
I said sharp and flat.
Okay.
I'm sorry, my brain just goes.
You're good.
Sorry, y'all.
So my question is, so here we go back to this form of imitation. And I'm going to just sort of talk about some of the choirs that we mentioned, that word said on the thread. So we talked about Love Fellowship a little bit. And I'm Jocelyn, so I'm curious to know, if we're imitating this bark, okay, is the hierarchy when it comes to the gospel performance the sound or the visual presentation of it over the note accuracy?
Sometimes in a live setting it is.
Yeah.
Because one of my pet peeves, I love Bishop Hez, I love LFT, but that song, How Much We Can Bear,
I can't bear. Yeah.
I put in the chat.
It goes from sopranos being sharp to the altos being on note to the tenors being flat. It's like, what?
What?
Doc, I put in the chat that the beginning to oh Lord, I'm saying, but I used to call him my name.
Yes.
Oh, how
And it, please. So bad.
I love them. I know many of them. They're good friends of mine. They know what they did.
they know
what they did. It hurts so much.
But then that's repetition and rehearsal and getting accuracy with ear training.
Yeah.
So do you?
When I was at because I'm no longer there, but at Allen,
yeah,
we were known, our team specifically, where artists would come in, like Tamlin would come by, Tamlin Mann, Marvin Sapp, Donnie McClurkin, Richard Smallwood. Richard actually apologized to us one time in between services because we were doing I Trust You.
Oh, Jesus.
And he wanted to use his stems. And we're like, but we got it. He's like, no, I'm gonna use the stems. Baby, them stems went out and we kept singing. And he was like, after the service, he was like, I have to apologize to you guys. I'm sorry. I was like, we got you. So good. No worries. But we made it a point to make sure that everybody heard and equated what was coming out of their mouth to how they heard it.
Yeah.
And the biggest compliment for me is when somebody don't have to turn around and go, what the heck are y'all doing?
As choirs are imitating this this bark, what can we do, or what are some things that we need to be aware of? Like, of course, note accuracy is important, but do we sometimes get lost in the sauce because it looks good? But I don't know, what is your hierarchy when it comes down to performance? Is it note accuracy, then the visuals of it, or I don't know, because I know with the bark, there's a wide wobble and we hear the wobble. But sometimes it seems like we miss the nucleus of the note because of the dramatic wobble effect that we're sort of going after. I don't know, like, what are your thoughts with this?
Sound makes so much of a difference. If you can hear yourself, it may help. We're talking about how these older choirs came out with these recordings where we're listening to them in the 2010s and 2020s and being like, that's flat. However, did they have the same like advantage equipment, advantage ears, headphones, earbuds that we do today? So, I mean, as a performer, like, I don't want to sing nothing if I can't hear myself. I don't know.
I get it.
Case in point, the Giveon thing that happened at the beach this year, where everybody was like, oh my God, he can't sing. But the real was that the microphone was auto-tuned to the wrong key. And he was listening, trying to figure out what was going on while everybody at their houses were listening, trying to see what's going on. But it's, can I hear myself? And is the sound that I'm producing based on what I'm hearing or based on what I think in my mind?
Yeah, for real. When I did the Kimberell recording, the live recording, I was the only alto. It was 2 sopranos, 2 tenors, and me.
Wow.
We didn't get to have a sound check. Right. Our monitors weren't optimal. I'm being nice.
I got you.
I seriously was like, Jesus, please allow this relative pitch to kick in.
Right.
Because we had to go on the ambient sound of the instruments to make sure that we knew where we were.
Right.
So I think there needs to be a little bit of time invested in ear training with choirs.
Yeah.
I think now, because we're hiring ringers, people that sing on a regular basis, we've gotten a little bit spoiled.
Yeah.
And people that aren't doing this as their vocation get lost in the sauce. So I think it is very valuable for directors, music departments, whatever, to invest quality time in training people, ear training people, so that they don't get so lost. So that because we came up, well, let me speak for myself. The views expressed by Melanie Daniels, her own. I came up in a time with bad sound systems. Microphones that didn't work, and I still had to produce a proper sound. In key, in pitch. So that was me taking the initiative myself to train my ear to make sure that I knew where I was going. Because you can throw yourself off by yawning.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that. And we see how this era, and I'm going to talk about the pandemic for a second, how the pandemic has also changed some things, but we see how this era has happened. For example, I don't really hear too much of the Clay Evans descant singers anymore, of those sopranos. The voices, as people are getting older and that sound is not as popular for younger.
This is where the Sopranos are.
I know.
That's where they at.
I know. And it's like, I really wish that we would embrace that, but I know that the sound of gospel, even as it has become chesty, I mean, as it always has been, but those type of singers really aren't in the church choirs as much anymore. Unless I want to go to maybe Abyssinia, or is it what's the one, Alexandria? What's one Alexandria, Virginia?
Reed Temple.
Oh, no, Reed Temple. No, it's the church in Alexandria, Virginia. Oh, there's Abyssinia. And
Alfred Street.
Thank you, Alfred Street. Yes. If I want to hear that sound, I will go to those churches, but I don't hear that, in the Anwise or whatever it may be. But I know that we've had to. I know that we've had to change. The choir is not as large as it used to be anymore. I'm so over Jocelyn.
Downsize.
Why would you do that? Oh my God! Let me turn my camera off.
But I mean, and I know, and I say this because I know that the church has evolved as it relates to the size of the groups. So we have the smaller ensembles now. With the pandemic, that has also played a part as well.
Major.
So Jocelyn, tell me what you think about that. Why do you think the pandemic played a strong part in this?
We had the opportunity to record things, listen to things, edit things, sharpen things, pitch correct, the way that we didn't on a live Sunday morning, unless you're I was going to say, unless you're in a church that has that type of stuff built into the system, but I've not been to that church that has like auto pitch correct on a Sunday morning. But no, the pandemic, we sat on panel, listened to and sat on panel after panel in the pandemic talking about Sunday morning church, but it has really changed the way we do church. Because the sound that was produced in April, May, June, July 2020 is not the sound of we're back in February now. Yeah. So it spoiled us. It spoiled us. It
absolutely
so many things. It made it seem like everybody that was getting in front of a mic was a bona fide singer.
Oh, take that thing away.
Case in point, I did something for a church and they put something on top of my pitch, and I was like, now wait a minute. I felt some type of way, like, what you trying to say?
Like, wait, you sit there clutching your pearls, like,
I was like, who is this? Who is this? And then that video went viral. So ghetto. Anyway. But we had the time. We had nothing but time in the pandemic. We had the time to go in and to change the way that it came out when we were recording to the way that it was aired and streamed on Sunday morning. It was all the behind the scenes that happened for church, that happened in rehearsals, pre-pandemic was happening in the media room during the pandemic. Yeah.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
I think it kind of crippled the choir.
I believe so.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it did. And because shoot, I ain't got to take off my clothes and get dressed to go to stay right here.
Right.
Like we were doing like the Brady Bunch blocks.
Yeah.
The virtual choirs. Oh.
Yeah, we were doing the Brady Bunch blocks with our praise team. Baby, all we had to do was download an app, make sure that thing was crisp. You know what I'm saying, on that little beat. Get your little hair
and a shirt. Not even
a good color shirt.
Right.
And send your joint in on time.
Yes. Yes.
Have you a good video audio editor?
Yep.
You need it.
Yeah,
it was a lot. It was a lot.
Yeah.
And I believe and I'm wondering now that as we've experienced the pandemic, we've noticed that the voices have changed throughout the eras. We've noticed how individual voices have changed, but also just the sound of the community choir, because, and this is just me personally, I have not heard a lot of church choirs imitate the gospel bark as much as community choirs. I'm sure they're out there. I just have not been exposed to them that I can think of. But I wonder, what is the life of the gospel ensemble beyond 2022? Will we still go ahead.
I think it's going to be like the Bible say, getting back to your first love.
I hope so. I love it.
You got to do your first works over again, huh?
Yeah.
Because we've gotten to a place like Josh was saying, we don't want to come to ballet rehearsal. Why? I ain't got to. Oh. Yeah. For what? Yeah. I mean, I heard a choir that hadn't been in the church in 2.5 years Sunday, and I was like, uh-oh, forgot everything.
Right.
I mean, and don't sit next to me at church. If something's not right, I'm like, uh-oh.
I'm sitting next to you, okay? I'm gonna sit right next.
That's where I need to be.
Right, that's where I need to be right there.
I can't hold it. I cannot hold it. Uh-oh.
And I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna cry.
Oh gosh.
But we have to get back into that routine, because we've all gotten spoiled that we didn't have to do it. It's just on a few people. Let them handle it. And corporate worship is what is supposed to be a reflection.
Yeah.
Choir singing is supposed to be a reflection of the congregation. That's why the church was designed the way it was designed. It's like the cherubim and the seraphim crying holy to each other. That's what it's supposed to mimic.
Yeah.
And that's why it's kind of hard when you have just teams and they've rehearsed themselves to a place of excellence, which is what we all endeavor to do, but it leaves out the regular congregant. The congregant is not going to bark.
Yeah, that is very true. That is very true.
And can we get between the five of us, let's get a good definition for what the bark is.
Oh no, I'm already typing stuff back. You're like ahead of me, and I love it, because my next, as we recap all of this, as we wrap up. All right, so let's go through a few things. All right, some true or false, yes or no kind of things. All right, so the barking. Well, I hate that term. Where did that term even come from?
See, somebody asked me, and I don't know if I'm correct or not, but I equated to like a literal dog barking. You see when they bark, like their body,
yes,
like there's their mouth shape, and like how dogs literally. I don't know. We should equate ourselves to dogs, but I just. In my brain, I'm such a literal person. I'm like, is that where it comes from? It's a literal dog barking?
No. I remember seeing videos and them zooming in on the tenor section or the altos when they were doing a certain part. You're like,
like I swear.
And all the white friends be like, why are they singing with their chin?
but you know what? And one thing I didn't get to, we're short on time, but the visual presentation of the bark. Do we believe that vibrato is controlled by the jaw, or can we agree that it's just the visual package that comes with the bark?
The latter. For me, it's the latter.
Yeah,
because your vibrato is like an organ, Leslie. It can slow down, and speed up.
Yeah. To me, it's just it's just drama. Just give me some drama. It's just drama. It just gives us something to look at. That's all.
Listen, I get it. Okay, so all right, the gospel bark. It began in the Northeast. True or false?
I don't know.
I only said that because that's where I'm from.
I don't even know where it began. I just know different regions, like she said, different regions have varying sounds of the bark, but so sorry.
And I would say
because look, sorry, go ahead, Love.
I was just gonna say that now people, because I taught high school in Memphis for several years, and I would argue that people in Memphis would say that the bark started in Memphis. So, and you would have to fight them to the death that it didn't. But I think I would agree probably that James Hall and like that Northeastern.
Yeah.
But then again, they were all contemporaries of one another because everybody was going to GMWA and meeting up once or twice a year and performing with one another.
So
there were certain things that were adapted, Yeah,
because go ahead, Jocelyn.
I said the chicken or the egg. I mean, it's
right.
And And the other thing is, I know we didn't get to do too many choir comparisons, but you have like even Ricky Dillard. His sound is different from the James Hall Bark. I would consider them contemporaries. And like you said, the Orlando Draper, and we can sort of scale it back really quick. So I'm going to take these notes. So first choir that you all can say that you recall barking. Melanie, you mentioned like institutional.
Institutional Church of God in Christ, the radio choir.
Okay.
Because they were on, they would do a Sunday night broadcast every Sunday night
Mm-hmm.
at 10 p.m. live on WWRL in New York City.
You got the whole thing down. I love that.
I'm sorry, I'm a nerd when it comes to dates.
Hey,
I remember stuff like that.
Good.
I need to go on Jeopardy.
Because that's so helpful. and Jeffrey, you mentioned Orlando Draper. Was your introduction to that?
Yes, Orlando Draper was my introduction.
Okay, all right. So we have the Memphis, we have the Northeast. Now, but it is fair to say, just to recap, that all regions have their own form of the gospel bark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. What I didn't ask you about, Florida Mass Choir. Not too much crazy, not too much wide vibrato-ish. What would you say about them?
To me,
Iconic, legendary.
Just because your aunt sing with them don't mean that, John.
The stuff that today's gospel is made of, Go ahead, Jaron. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
like, oh no, you're good. I will say, like, to me, they remind me of like some of the other state choirs, like the Mississippi. Like, to me, I would put them in similar.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
things.
you'd have to, because they were all produced by Milton Bingham.
That is so true. And then also,
but there you go, never mind. So, well, that's that. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because I sang on, the only reason I said that was one of my first gospel professional gigs was singing with New Jersey Mass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I forgot about them.
I
forgot about them. Yeah.
Yeah. So Jeff Banks in New Jersey Mass, that was because Milton Bingham is from New Jersey. So he started going up and down the coast, Georgia, Mississippi, Florida, wherever else, whoever else. Colorado Mass, Joe Pace, another one.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they had a totally different sound. They had that West Coast thing.
But it seems. Go ahead.
To me, I will say, to me, the state choirs reminded me so much more of a Sunday.
That's what I was just about to say.
Yes.
Like the barking is way more community kind of drama. But to me, like the state choirs are very much Sunday like I would hear my parents sing their songs on Sunday morning when I was growing up, So yeah, they're way more, because I mean, if you think of like I said, I love the LA Mass. That's one of my favorite choirs. Yeah. And to me, they have a clean sound, but it's still way more palatable for like a Sunday morning versus like James Hall, Greatest Mystery of Godliness, though I love that song.
My life was torn.
Yeah, come on here, and everybody sung that song back in the day.
It's singable.
Yeah, very singable. I mean, we sung "We Praise Thee, Oh God." I don't know that one. I love that arrangement. So so their stuff was way more singable for the masses of churchgoers versus the barking thing was way more controlled and kind of focused.
Yeah. Now, and with that being the case, now, one thing I want to also ask as we start to sort of wrap this up and put some kind of legs on this definition, does the size of the ensemble determine if the bark, also, if we have 30 singers, does the bark differ compared to 200 singers?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely.
I think I think anybody who wants to know or can bark by themselves, but I think it makes more musical sense when it's a bigger group, because then the sound of the bark, the sound of the thickness of it. But I mean, in terms of the definition, it just takes anybody with a working voice who wants to try can do it. But I think in terms of the cultural sound of it, I do think size can play a factor, because of course the bigger you get, the thicker the sound is, so then the more heavier and dramatic the bark can be. But then again, you got James Hall, who can sometimes have 3 on each part and sound like you a million. So
no, he would have 3 sopranos, 5 altos, and 8 tenors. Right. And each section sounded full.
Yeah, it may be skill level too, or maybe ability. That could be a part of it too.
Yeah.
I do think, though, the larger the ensemble gets, though, the impetus is on the director then to try to help. like to kind of direct it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like if you have 30 sopranos all going, then you start having like intonation. So then like
Right.
we gotta all figure out how
you start looking like that thing outside the phone store.
But I've heard large choirs do it, and like you can hear like the amplitude of the vibrato is happening with every single soprano the same exact way, and the amount is you see it. So I do think that then the skill, again, the impetus is on the director, and the larger the groups get to help to guide it.
Because to me, when I was with New G, there was a certain vibrato speed that we kind of all unknowingly learned from each other. So so when I was with them, there was a certain speed and a certain shape that I had. But like to me, in my brain, when I hear James Hall, for instance, their vibrato is way more mixed. So it kind of goes kind of like this, but Ricky Dillon is kind of more like this.
Right.
So it's not good or bad, it's just different, but I feel like you said, having the director control, which is once again why I call it vibrato control, because you have to keep them in the reins of the confines of what is controlled and what's kind of just like all over the place, and you get kind of like so.
You learned. I know that I learned that singing in the studio, having to match myself. That the vibrato had to remain consistent each track that I would stack, so it wouldn't sound like
That's very true.
And even in recording choirs, if you're going back in to do overdubs, they have to be cognizant of that. That's why I was saying that it would be something that would be valuable if we took the quality time to ear train the people, so that when they got into a situation like that, it's more cohesive in a live setting. So that when you get into the studio, it's not a nightmare. We're going to do 5 songs tonight, and you end up doing 1 because everybody can't agree. You know what I'm saying?
That is very true. And I want to thank you all so much for this conversation. I know there's always so much more to discuss. I'm going to certainly I'm going to take these notes down and share it with our people. And what I will say, because education and the academy is becoming more appreciative of Black music, and they care more, they want to do more of our stuff.
They doing our stuff and they don't even know it. Okay, go ahead.
Oh Lord Jesus. I ain't got no Bible, but so I agree. And the thing is, we've, like Jeff said, earlier before, working with someone who is, from the classical world, and having them to say that gospel is damaging the voice. I was taught that when I was in college, but I still sang it anyway, because that's just me. That is what kept me grounded.
Same.
As Jaron said in one of his posts, like the church choir, that is vocal, like that's some vocal. What'd you say? Vocal
formal training.
Yeah. It is. But as the Music Academy continues to evolve, we want to make sure that they respect our music. I won't say continue, because not all people do, but they respect what we bring to the table as it relates to gospel. It's not just noise. Because there's, in the Melanie Burnham book here, it describes there's someone who heard the Black music and said it's described as noise. It doesn't make sense. But in fact, there is a reason as to why we sound the way we sound and we do what we do. It's not just something we produce with our mouth, but it's a whole body experience. And for people who don't do that or did not grow up doing that, it's hard for them to understand how to do it. And quite frankly, I know imitation is great, but some things just can't be imitated.
Right.
Some things have to be lived. And the gospel sound is something you live. So,
absolutely.
Melanie, you're making me
hungry. Tell everybody that they must go watch the documentary produced by Questlove called Summer of Soul.
Oh, yes.
I gotta watch that still. I haven't watched it yet.
Because Mahalia Jackson.
Late.
Baby, that wig was toe back. But she did.
I love that. I wish there was something like that now that I could go to, where it was just that good.
And it gives a highlight into the African American musical diaspora, because you can't have soul music without gospel.
Yeah,
you can't.
No, not at all. Like I say, thank you all so much for your time. We're going to be doing some more work on this, and just know that the Gospel Bark.
When we doing it again? Let's do it again.
I'm ready. Listen, and this time I'm going to make sure that Facebook actually works like it should. Shoot. So, but all right, here we go. Signing off, y'all. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.